Hello, everybody. My name is David Pallmann, and I'm very pleased to be with you. My job at AWS is .NET Developer Advocacy, which is trustworthy technical information. And today we are going to give you a high-level overview of the world of developing for .NET on AWS. And that'll necessarily be high-level, but we will intermix slides and online resources with deploying some workloads. Let me see that. I do want to say I think I have probably the best and most fun job in the world, which is making .NET great, better and better on AWS. So it's something I really enjoy. So the first thing I want you to know is that AWS loves .NET. My team's entire mission is just focused on making .NET development better and better. We have many people from Microsoft, and it's just a platform we love. Many of us have been with us at the very beginning. I know many of you love it as well. You're getting an echo when I talk. I'm not sure why that would be. So we have AWS has actually been supporting .NET in the cloud longer than anyone since 2008, and we have released an awful lot of things and still are to make it good. As you know, AWS has an awful lot of cloud services, so it takes quite a bit of work to get that support and keep that up to date and all the different services there. So this kind of gives you an idea of what our release schedule has been. There's a number of items here for .NET support in different services, as well as various tools that are .NET specific, modernization tools, and we'll talk about some of those. You can run .NET on 485 different types of EC2 instances. There are 255 different Amazon machine images for Windows workloads, so it's something we take very seriously. So before we go anywhere, let's build something. Let's build a serverless Lambda function. If there's two things that are popular today, serverless and containers are it. So let's do a serverless. And then we'll kind of talk about what we did. So here I've got one that I generated with the command. I generated it with .NET new Lambda, that empty function, an empty Lambda project named hello Lambda 1. The only reason I'm opening existing one is I put some code in it already. For the sake of time, I'm going to open that with Visual Studio 2022 because we're using .NET 6. And if you don't know what a Lambda function is, it's just a function that software runs. You don't put it out on any kind of allocated machines. The machines are allocated when the function is called. And so one thing you might notice right away is my Visual Studio has an AWS Explorer. That comes from the AWS toolkit for Visual Studio that I installed, and that gives me a view into what's deployed. So I have some things deployed from other projects, for example, that I can look at and see, and we'll use that more. Here's my generated code. Function CS is, and I just took the default function. It just makes a string uppercase. I thought that was kind of boring, so I replaced that with code that does a alphabetizes a phone number. And we can go ahead and run that and debug. Well, we can test it locally with the mock Lambda test tool. Way before we go to the cloud, we can just run it and try it out. So here are in the mock Lambda test tool for our version of .NET, which is .NET 6. And you'll notice I had set a breakpoint in my code, and I can do phone number. So I'll do my phone number. And you notice that allows me to set a breakpoint and look at my code and examine things to see how it's doing. Okay, here's my input. I can see what's happening there. I can let that proceed. So that's certainly useful when you're starting out and you want to debug your function in a simulated environment. But we want to deploy this now since we know it works. And how do we do that? Well, we can go right over here, Solution Explorer, right-click the project and say Published AWS Lambda. And what do we have here? It's going to package it up into a zip file. It's going to use .NET 6, and we have the choice. We can do. It's going to be running on Linux, and we have the choice of x86 architecture. But we also put it on a Graviton ARM device, just to be really cutting edge here. Extra performance there. And the name of the function is hello lambda 1. I believe that's correct. You do have to have all these details right for this to work. And because I did this previously, I think it's already set. The assembly name is hello lambda 1. The function class is hello lambda 1 namespace dot function, and the method itself is function handler. I believe that's all correct. And so we have our guided experience here. What is Graviton? Graviton is Amazon's ARM processors. So instead of Intel architecture, you have ARM, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Because once we get some of these things built here, we're going to go back to slides, and so I will go through that. But you can get as much for .NET workloads. You can get as much as a 40% performance improvement by running on ARM. Something you can do with .NET on Linux that you couldn't do with .NET Framework on Windows. Okay, so we're just going to say go do it. I think I got everything right here. So it's publishing to AWS. Now, in the old days, you would have to go to the AWS Management Console and create a service before you could deploy anything. You have to package it up. But you see nowadays we have all that kind of being done for you. And it's deployed. And we can tell it's deployed because it says up here, last update status successful. And in fact, if we go over here to our AWS Explorer, we see hello Lambda 1 here is the one that's highlighted. And now we're in another test console, but the test console here is actually going to actually invoke the function up in the cloud where it is, which is in US West to Oregon at the moment. So let's do our input, invoke it. Okay, that went to the cloud, ran it. You can see all the output, did its thing. And you get the logs right here. So if you're a maybe a little more traditional AWS user, you might have noticed I have yet to go to the AWS Management Console. I don't really need to for Visual Studio. I've got everything I need here, logs and everything else, and so that's pretty neat. So I'm going to switch back to slides a bit, and then we'll come back and build something else momentarily. Okay, so we have a lot of options at AWS, a lot of services. So these are just compute services. These are services for hosting. And if you look at the top indicator there for .NET Framework, so traditional .NET on Windows, I don't know how many of you have older workloads, but we talk a lot about modernization, but of course there's work involved in that. You can't always do that, or you have other priorities as a business maybe. So .NET Framework can run on Amazon EC2. That's kind of our low-level, what is often called sometimes infrastructure as a service. That's where you control everything, every last little bit of detail. The other services have various degrees of being managed for you. Elastic Beanstalk is one that's been around a while, and if you typically had an ASP.NET IIS workload that you wanted some management help, Elastic Beanstalk was often the stronghold service for that. What are these other services? Well, Lightsail is for very simple websites where you want to pay a fixed price. The Elastic Container Service, or ECS, is for working with containers, and that's really our flagship, I would say, container hosting service. It has a lot of fancy features called orchestration. Some people, though, really like Kubernetes from Google, and so if you like Kubernetes, we have the Elastic Container Service for Kubernetes, or EKS. And so both of those are container-based services with a lot of features, but there's also as much as there's an interest in containers, there's also interest in serverless. And serverless simply means I don't set up any servers. Of course, there are servers somewhere, but you don't have to manage them. They're just automatic. And Fargate allows both ECS and EKS, the two services I just talked about, to run in serverless mode. And then if you want containers and serverless, but you don't want all of that extra orchestration, advanced features, you can use App Runner. It's a simpler way to do everything. And then lastly, we have what I just showed you, which is Lambda, which is just a serverless, where you actually literally all your code is just a function. So you'll notice that from this diagram here that .NET Framework can run almost all of those except App Runner and Lambda. Those can only run on Linux, but the rest can all support .NET Framework. And then modern .NET can run on every one of these services. To make that a little clearer, we'll look in a minute about how to determine which service to use. But Graviton, someone asked earlier about it. That is ARM64. Amazon is in its third generation of Graviton processors. Been doing it for a couple of years now. And Graviton 3 is the newest one, but the Graviton 2 had quite a bit of benchmarking done, 40% better price performance than Intel architecture. So it's a way to get more bang for the buck. And then Graviton 3, which came out recently, is 25% better than that. Somebody mentions you can also deploy a Blazor Windows Assembly apps to Amplify, which is a Jamstack. Yes, I despite all those services I mentioned, I actually didn't list all of them. So good point. So how do you figure this out? Well, first off, let's talk about on Windows. So you can certainly run .NET on Windows on AWS, and so we kind of have a continuum of ways you can migrate and modernize your apps. So the simplest one is called rehost or lift and shift. And if you had a .NET framework or .NET app on Windows, and you just wanted to run it and you wanted to do everything yourself, you could do it on Amazon EC2. That's where you control the instance types and how many, and if you want to set up a load balancer, you do that, and it's all under your very direct control. But if you want some help and some management, which more and more folks want, you have second item here, Elastic Beanstalk. That's going to be EC2 instances, but it's managed for you. Things like load balancers are set up automatically for you. If you're liking containers, and containers are a very easy way to lift and shift a lot of workloads to AWS without changing much of anything. You've got ECS and EKS as I mentioned before, and they can both run managed Windows containers. And the only real difference between them is that the EKS gives you Kubernetes, which again, some people are a big fan of. My understanding of Kubernetes is it's got a lot of features, but it does give you enough rope that you can hang yourself if you're not careful. So it's not for the timid, I think it's fair to say. And then if you want to do managed containers as well as be serverless, then you can use with Windows, you can use ECS along with the Fargate option, where you won't see EC2 instances. That'll just be automatically created for you when your application executes. So what about modern .NET on Linux? Because that's certainly an option, and that certainly is more affordable. So once again, you could run directly on EC2 if you like controlling everything. But if you want to be managed, you have quite a few options. Elastic Beanstalk can run managed things like ASP.NET apps on Linux just fine. And when we get into containers, we have ECS, EKS again, right now on Linux containers. We can go serverless with the Fargate option on ECS. EKS doesn't support that. We can do App Runner if we don't care about orchestration of containers. So if we have press one container, and serverless, we can do it Lambda, which you just saw me demonstrate. So lots of choices. And again, there are a few others. There's Amplify, which is good for front ends. So there's lots of choice, but ask yourself a couple quick questions. So how managed do I want it to be? Do I care about containers? Do I care about serverless? Do I care about orchestration? It's 4 or 5 questions. If you can answer well, then it will significantly reduce the options, and it won't seem like such a big plethora of choices. So let's do another demo. This one will take a few minutes, so I'm going to start it, and then I'm going to come back to the presentation here. We're going to do a web API. Close what we had here. let's see. .NET deployment. Okay, so what we've got here is the result of .NET New Web API. And it just gives you, probably many of you have seen this, it just gives you a weather forecast. Let's just run it and see. Okay, so this is just out-of-box generated .NET, and to actually run it, when you actually run it, you have to add, if you're not using Swagger, you have to put their forecast on into the path to get a response. So let's just show you what that looks like when we compare it in the cloud. Here it is, making it a little bigger for you. Well, that's, but that represents a lot of different types of web projects, all sorts of, one of the most popular types of workloads now are APIs and microservices. So good, we can stop that, and we want to publish it to AWS. But which service? We looked at an awful lot of services before, and so here we have this. What I'm showing here is a new published AWS experience that was just released last week. We want to publish it to AWS, and well, what are some of our choices here? In case you can't read that too well, one choice is we can deploy this ASP.NET Core app to Amazon ECS using Fargate, so the Elastic Container Service. We can deploy it to AWS App Runner. That's probably our most fully managed service. It makes every decision for you unless you want to override it, and is both containers and serverless. We could put it on Elastic Beanstalk on Linux. We could put it on Elastic Beanstalk on Windows. Or we could containerize it and just put it in the Elastic Container Registry, a repository for containers, not actually deploy it yet, but have it there waiting. So what do you all want to do? Pick a target. We don't have time for all three, so I'll do whichever one you want to entertain. Do you want to type in a suggestion in chat? App Runner, okay. Before I do that, let me just point something out. If you've ever used these services, you know how different they are. So let me just show you, as I choose these different options here, you'll see it tells you on the right what it plans to do. You can go and edit settings and see. So for example, with App Runner, you have not very many choices because it's automatic. A few things you can override, but it doesn't let you select an instance type. It works with virtual CPUs. It's really a service for handholding where you don't have to have much of a knowledge of things. But if we looked at, for example, ECS, we are going to see a much deeper list of things we can control. All these services have very, very different models. So the thing that's kind of interesting here is that the published to AWS experience is exactly the same for all of them. You do not have to make any decisions. They will be intelligently defaulted. And that's not to say you can't make any decisions. You can go into settings like I just showed you and change anything you want to, but you don't have to. So here we are. We said we want App Runner. It's going to tell me on the right, okay, by default, I'm going to name this Hello Net Deploy Web API Service, because that was the name of my project, Hello Net Deploy Web API. I'm going to go on port 80. I'm going to automatically create the IAM security roles in our identity and access management service. I'm going to give you this much CPU, this much memory, and this is where it's going to be in the container repository. I'm going to containerize the app. I'm going to do it all. So that sounds pretty good to me. So we're going to click publish. Are you sure? Yeah. In the region we want, US West Oregon. Yep, that's where we're working. So let's go do it. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You've used automatic software that does it all for you in the past, and you don't like it because A, you don't have enough control over things, and B, it's magic how it works, and you don't know what's going on. So that is not the case here. If anything, the publish maybe give you too much information. It's going to tell you exactly what it's doing. Now, what is it, all this output right now? Well, it's creating a container. And if you let it go a little further, you'll see that it'll start to take these outputs and put them in expandable accordion sections so you can navigate them easily. This is going to take somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes, I think. So I'm not going to wait. I'm going to come back. Right? I'm going to leave it right here, and we're going to come back to it. So let's talk about development tools. Here's kind of an overview of the different tools you get from AWS to make your .NET development better. So you've seen me just now using twice now the AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio that gives us these published wizards and the new published AWS Experience and the AWS Explorer. We also have toolkits for Visual Studio Code and for Writer. The Visual Studio one has been around a little longer, so it has it's a little more full-featured at the moment. All three have very strong features, especially for serverless. And in case you're not aware, .NET has changed a lot since 20 years ago. Sure, there's a lot of people who are still legacy caretakers running on Windows, Microsoft shops, but we talk to many customers and we hear about teams that are running on both PCs and Macs and using a combination of IDs, even on the same team. So it's very important to be able to do things on PCs and Macs and not assume a particular set of tools. All of the things I'm showing you, for example, in Visual Studio, are available from the command line. And that's important not only for the reason I just mentioned, but also so that you can use these capabilities in your CI/CD pipelines. We have the way you get at AWS programmatically is the AWS SDK for .NET. We'll talk about that a little more. And the way that you do infrastructure as code is the Cloud Development Kit, or CDK. And that is being, right now as our deployment is running, CDK is being written. It will write the infrastructure as code as part of this process. That's why it takes a little longer. And it'll write that as a C# project, infrastructure as code, which generates CloudFormation, which is AWS's underlying deployment. Basically generates a lot of JSON to ultimately do it. Now you see here what just happened is all that stuff in creating the deployment image was all that output we saw, but now it's nicely accordioned, so we can make sense of what's going on. We have this high-level view. And now it's putting a container out to the Elastic Container Registry. So it's going to go and do its thing. But again, plenty of information. So if you need to learn, it's here what's going on. And if you need to debug something, the information is here what's going on. But we don't have to do much thinking. And I can be very new to these services, and it'll just do the driving for me, which is nice. So what else do we have here? Well, we have a whole bunch of command line tools. If you're a PowerShell user, we have AWS tools for PowerShell, which are very extensive. We have a whole bunch of extensions to the .NET command. So if you're a .NET developer with modern .NET, ever since .NET Core, you love the .NET command. Well, there's .NET AWS deploy and lots of other things to work from the command line. For Lambdas, for the serverless, the first example I gave you, we have the serverless application model. So if you have perhaps an API backed by a whole bunch of serverless functions, how do you make that into a model where you can manage it well? A model exists for that, along with templates. And the .NET deployment tool is the command line equivalent to what you're seeing me run now on Visual Studio, the published AWS experience. For CI/CD, people use an awful lot of tools. What are some of the tools you folks use for CI/CD for your DevOps? What do you deploy with? Go ahead and put some answers in chat if you want. GitLab, ADO, Azure DevOps, Azure DevOps is very popular. We talk to customers an awful lot like Azure DevOps. So it might surprise you to know that Azure DevOps can deploy to AWS. We have the AWS toolkit for Azure DevOps, and that's available. It's very popular. AWS has its own services, code pipeline, code build. A lot of people use GitHub Actions. There's lots and lots of choices. We don't limit those at all. And then over on the right, you see modernization tools. App2Container is a tool that will help you containerize something larger than a simple app. A porting system for .NET helps you get from .NET Framework to .NET. It will advise you on updates and compatibility of packages. And AWS Microservice Extractor for .NET will help you turn a monolith into microservices. I'll talk more about those tools in a little more detail coming up. Let's see how our deployment's going now. All right. It is now, it has written, so it created a cloud development kit or CDK C# project for infrastructure as code, and now it is deploying it. And it gets deployed with CloudFormation. CloudFormation is very meticulous, and it does take some time. This is the part that kind of takes a couple of minutes. So this is why we're checking and coming back. But you'll see, it's giving you everything there is to know. Okay, let's talk about IDEs. So the AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio, you've seen me using. It gives you that Explorer view, has a whole bunch of different wizards, project templates, and for CloudFormation, if you're working JSON, it has IntelliSense for that. And it's free, of course. So some of the wizards look like. Publish to AWS is a way, is that new experience I just showed you. So it can go to ECS, it can go to App Runner, it can go to Beanstalk, it can also do Blazor. We will see an example of that. The toolkit for Visual Studio Code, again, predominantly focuses on serverless, so a whole lot of features with Lambda templates and Lambda debugging. And that is also true for the writer. So let's talk about the SDK, how you program for .NET. Now, you don't always need to use the SDK. In fact, the two examples I've just shown you, the one that's still processing, didn't do anything with the SDK, because if you're hosting, you probably don't need to do anything specialized with our APIs for hosting. But if you want to talk to a database or many of our machine learning services or many different things that we do, you need a programmatic interface, and that's what the SDK for .NET is all about. Its home is it's public domain on GitHub, so you can see it. Open source, GitHub/AWS.NET. Programmatic access to everything. It's updated every week. And it supports both .NET Framework and .NET Modern. And here's kind of the landscape of that. The SDK has a bunch of offshoots. There's the AWS tools for PowerShell. There's the toolkits here. We have session state provider for Dynamo database. We have trace listeners if you want to do distributed trace logging. And for speaking of logging, if you use ASP.NET Core Logging or nlog or Log4net or Serlog, we have extensions that let you use all of those systems the way you normally use them. They will go into AWS's CloudWatch logging seamlessly. You don't have to do anything special programmatically. Just enable it. And coding the SDK is pretty straightforward. It's very consistent. AWS actually generates all of the SDKs for the languages are generated for consistency. So if I'm talking to a particular service, I like the DynamoDB service, I have a couple of using statements for the service and its model. I create a client, I typically tell it what region I want to work in. And I call service operations by creating a request object to get back a response object. I give it some parameters, very straightforward. If you have to page your responses, maybe you're getting a big list of items from your S3 storage bucket, then there's a standard pattern for sequencing through that. So once you start to learn it, you very quickly intuitively know it for other areas. See how we're doing. We're chugging away there. Won't be too much longer. Command line tools. So tools for PowerShell. I don't know if we have any PowerShell lovers here, but you certainly don't have to use PowerShell. But if you are a PowerShell lover, in fact, one of the developer advocates on my team wrote these tools. and there are over 200 service modules and 10,000 different commandlets. So you think of some very specific thing you want to do with AWS, there's probably a commandlet for it. And then we have extensions to the .NET command. So for example, .NET AWS deploy is how you get the new deployment experience with the command line, very nicely integrated with the .NET commands that we're all used to. For Lambda, the Lambda team has really outdone itself. Lots and lots and lots of templates. So to make things easy, if I want to do, for example, a Lambda function that's going to talk to my storage service and the simple storage service, or S3, there's a template, Lambda S3, I can use for that. Gets me off to a running start. So deployment, Lambda, ECS, Beanstalk, all built in, and won't belabor that. CI/CD, we mentioned earlier, Azure DevOps. It's very popular. We have a toolkit for it, but you can use your tool of choice. So we never try to dictate that. Come on, publish to AWS, you can do it. So the Cloud Development Kit, this is your infrastructure as code in C#. The way that works is you have code snippets you write, they look like this. And these snippets are called constructs. And you can easily extend them. You can create your own and share them. And there is, in fact, a place to share them called Construct Hub. Let me just show you that. Construct Hub, let's see, for .NET has 615 constructs. So we do a lot of work, including the features I'm showing you today, to make .NET on AWS development easier. But let's be honest, if you're doing infrastructure as code and you're using a number of AWS services, you probably have some things to figure out about how to connect them and all. Infrastructure as code is not really for the faint of heart. So these constructs are snippets you can use that get you going. So with 615 of them, there's a good chance that something you need is already here in some form, and you can take that and get again off to a running start. Let's see how we're doing here. Oh yeah, we finished. Okay, it wasn't as long as you thought, folks. I think only 7 or 8 minutes. So what happened here? Well, the coordinates tell the story. It created a deployment image. It published that to the Elastic Container Registry Service, or ECR. It wrote infrastructure as code, Cloud Development Kit, and then executed it, which involved translating that into JSON for the CloudFormation service that really does the work, and it deployed. Well, if it deployed, where is it? Well, right on the right is the information you need to have. So we've got, copy this to my clipboard here. We have got our endpoint right there. So let's give it a whirl. And we should point out that we can also see it. Well, let's just go to it. Okay, not working. How come? Who knows why? Do we wait all this time for nothing? Well, if you remember when we tested the app, it actually needs the because it has the weather forecast control. It actually needs weather forecast at the end, so all is as expected. Here we go. Nice. And if you want to see what the service that actually does this app runner is, I'm gonna just give me a minute to get my AWS login here. But let's look at what that looks like. Okay, AWS App Runner. Here we are. And there's our Hello Net Deploy Web API service. We haven't need to go to the console at all so far, have we? Here we're just taking a peek. And it keeps a log, which matches the logs you've been seeing. Tells you what's happening there, is activity. We can watch what's going on. Now we've only accessed exactly once. So you probably wouldn't expect to see a whole lot from like a dashboard, but should see pretty soon. Once the login catches up, we should see our loan access there. In fact, we can access it couple more times, keep things interesting. But before long, there'll be observability there. Now, as we saw in the settings, you can override things. I don't want you to get the idea that app runner is so automatic you can't change anything. It's pulling this image out, this software out of the container registry. That means if we work with containers and update the container in the registry, app runner is automatically updated, and you can configure it to do that or not do that as you wish. You also can set up app runner to pull from your favorite GitHub repo, so it can detect that you keep GitHub repo changed, and it can pull and recontainerize and deploy that way. So it's simple to use, but it's actually pretty sophisticated. No metrics yet, but we'll check back. So that's app runner. Go back to my slides. So let's just talk quickly because I know we're running low on time here, and I want to make sure you understand your developer resources. App container will take your applications and containerize them, and it'll figure out a lot of things about dependencies for you and make that straightforward. To set you up to run the Elastic Container Service or EKS with Kubernetes. Porting system for .NET is going to be looking at your .NET framework code, analyzing it, telling you to go to .NET is going to take the following. And there are problems. For example, if you use Windows Communication Foundation, WCF, I was on that WCF team at Microsoft 20 years ago. That didn't get ported over to .NET Core. So if you're going to use that, what do I do, right? So things like that will be pointed out to you and given some options. And the microservice extractor for .NET, this could be a whole talk, but there's this very common movement today to go to microservices, very small targeted pieces of functionality. But a lot of people have monoliths, really large, single self-enclosed large applications. How do you move from a monolith to a microservice? Well, there's a pattern for that. It's called the strangler fig pattern, after a vine that acts this way. You start carving off little pieces of your monolith into microservices, and before you know it, the monolith isn't there anymore. AWS Microservice Extractor for .NET will help you with that. It'll visually analyze your code and show you and suggest areas that make sense to peel off in that way. So let's do a Blazor WebAssembly example. We don't have too much more time, but I think we can get one more example started, and then I'll upload solution. Okay, so we have .NET deploy Blazor. Now I'm going to admit that I don't know a whole lot about Blazor, but that's okay because I have the published AWS experience to be smart for me. So if you don't know too much about Blazor, it is basically C# for, in the case of a C# WebAssembly, where you could use JavaScript in a web front end, you can use C#, which is pretty amazing. And I have to admit, when Blazor first came out, I thought it was going to go the way of Silverlight. I thought, well, JavaScript is so entrenched in so many JavaScript libraries, people know this doesn't have a chance of getting traction. Yet I've been very surprised and pleased to see how popular Blazor is in social media. It clearly has a large following already. So here's our Blazor app, and just to show you how it handles state, we can go to this counter page and can click me. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can mock it fetching data from back end. And so, okay. But we just have here what's called a WebAssembly. So something that runs in the browser is all we have here. And I don't know, can we just deploy something like that to AWS? What would that even mean? Well, let's see. Push to AWS. AWS says, I know how to do that. I can put that in the Amazon S3 bucket as a static website, and I can give you an Amazon CloudFront, that's our CDN distribution. It's worldwide accessibility. So, okay, well, go ahead, let's go do it. Publish. Again, it's going to take a few minutes, so I'm not going to waste our time here. Let's move on. Let's talk about open source. AWS is very committed to open source. We are a member of and corporate sponsor of the .NET Foundation, and many AWS open source projects, including the SDK for .NET, project templates, NuGet packages, and even the AWS documentation are open source projects that you can examine and contribute to. And AWS also sponsors open source projects, and so we know the value. And they don't have to be AWS related. Like Fluent Validation is no connection with AWS inherently, but we like what they're doing and we sponsor them. And if you are involved in an open source project, you can request support. You can also request and easily get free AWS credit for your open source project. For that matter, any AWS developer can request developer credit as well on our website. Well, what are some of the projects we have? Well, I haven't taken you yet to our developer hub, but I'm about to. We have some of the projects I already mentioned. A big one, though, is Core WCF. I mentioned that there was not an official .NET Core version of WCF, but there is an open source project, Core WCF, and AWS is a regular contributor to that. And so, in fact, Microsoft recognized that. So we're integrally involved. We support the open source community, and we're part of it, and we think it's really important, and we're proud to support it. So, developer resources, the .NET and AWS website. Let's go to that. It's going to be over here. This is the .NET and AWS website. You can just go to aws.amazon.com/net to get there easily. And this is really meant to be your .NET and AWS developer hub. It should lead you to everything else you need. So what's on there? Well, news for one thing, and one of the things that's on here is .NET 6 support. Whenever there's a new major release of .NET every November, it does take a little while and slightly different schedules for the various AWS service teams to get support. And how do you know where you can use .NET 6 or if you want .NET 7? Well, the answer is here. We keep this guide updated, points out what you can do, how you can do. If we don't have support yet, it gives you a workaround. So that's a reference you want, and that's why it's front and center on our website. On our Getting Started page, this is for folks. This is what it says. Getting started. This is give me training, get me started on things, give me tutorials. You can request AWS developer credit right here. Tutorials and videos, getting started, quick starts, and walkthroughs. How do I set up CI/CD for .NET applications, a particular service? How do I set up a .NET development environment? How do I deploy an automated pipeline? You can search for it. You can do it by categories, or you can just search by keywords. Tutorial videos, all meant to give you a running start. Let's talk about content. One place to find content is on our how-to page, which just launched. We realized that AWS content for developers is in a lot of different places, and although we're trying to tie it all together in the hub here, you don't always know what you're searching for. I know I need something on messaging. I don't remember the name of the AWS service. Oh, I bet I do this, and okay, these are. Oh yeah, it's SQS. Now that I realize that, I could actually search on that particular service down here. But if I didn't realize that, I can go categorically. So categorically or by tool or by service, you can start typing in keywords and zoom into to find the content that you're after, and then go to it. So even if the content isn't normally housed on the site here, we will go find it for you. And for that matter, it's not just AWS content. We also have the best of community. You'll see blogs here as well. And as far as content goes, we also have the developer docs page. We are still building this out, so we're still adding to it. But this is where you will shortly see all the service documentation and things that maybe you're out there, but you're not sure where they are, all in one place for you. But you can, for example, I want to see code samples. I want to see case studies. Find that there. And then feature content. Here we have preview chapters of an O'Reilly animal book that's coming out. developing on AWS with C#, and that will be free digitally on the site. But right now you can see preview chapters, get an idea, or get feedback. The SDK documentation is here. There's a very good developer guide there. And then if you're still not finding what you want, you have my blog post, the .NET Developer's Guide to AWS Documentation. And that will just show you where everything is that you could possibly want to find. Community, very important to us. Well, an awful lot of community members out there write blogs, they create videos, they do live streams. That includes AWS community builders, AWS heroes, and the AWS customers, partners, employees, all are out there contributing. How do you find everything? How do you find your community? Well, it's right here on the community page. First off, there's .NET and AWS Twitter. And if you want to stay tuned into news and what's going on, that's where you want to be. Announcements, how-to guides, latest videos, latest examples of things. It's all there. By the way, how's our deployment? Almost done. 11 of 14 CloudFormation steps done. I believe it will happen. Back to the community page. People to follow. Noam Johansson is the lead engineer on the SDK team. He's out there in community. You can talk to him. He'd love to hear from you. François Bouderouche does an awful lot with Blazor and .NET support. He's based out of Paris, blogs, and does more shows than a human being could possibly do, but he does. You find some of our developer advocates and solution architects, Josh Hurley, Steve Roberts. They're all people you can follow, worth following. YouTube channels. We have quite a few .NET influencers who do a lot of great YouTube content. For example, Nick Chapsis, who's the very big voice in the .NET world. There's lots of content, and you can just tell from his view counts here. He has 127,000 followers. He has he tends to get tens of thousands of views on his content. It's very, very popular, and so we're very happy he does .NET and AWS content for us. But we also have Wes Doyle, Wisconsin's own Wes Doyle. Does a lot of things, especially a lot of tutorials on microservices. And we have Rahul Nath in Australia, who's got both a popular AWS series as well as a blog. And whatever we do shows and sessions, the recordings that AWS does go on the .NET and AWS YouTube playlist, which is here. And you'll see lots of session videos from our last developer conference in April. Now I'm giving you a lot of things, but you don't have to remember much, because if you just remember the .NET and AWS website, all of these things are from there. So blogs. So one of our developer advocates, Brian Hogan, has a very, very popular blog called No Dogma Blog. He blogs several times a week on lots of things, but especially lately Lambda functions. So if you're a Lambda person, serverless, he's a person to follow. Brian also does a podcast. He's been doing both a blog and podcast for years and years and years. He talks to a lot of very influential people in the .NET community. Definitely worth taking part of. I do a blog series every week. I do a Hello Cloud. It's getting started. It's the minimum you need to know, but that's how people start. And so, for example, if you're really interested in how Amazon recognition works, what is it? Why should you use it? How does it work? Practical examples. Let's build something step by step, like the Betty Crocker cookbook, illustrated cookbook. Right? Nothing assumed. Steve Roberts, one of our popular developer advocates, also has a blog. He does a lot on PowerShell in particular. And then AWS has a number of blogs. It's AWS Developer Tools blog, the AWS Architecture blog. The architecture blog is not necessarily .NET specific, but architecture is architecture. It's information you'll need. Open source projects, here are some of the ones that are highlighted. We mentioned that earlier. And then what if you just need help? Of course, the Stack Overflow, very popular. We have an AWS developer Slack, which is also popular, but there's also newest is AWS Repost, which is an overhaul of what used to be called AWS Forums. And this is one that's particularly good because it's a place where AWS customers and partners and employees all hang out to answer questions. And so if you go there, you got a question, it's a good place to ask it. And if you go to the topics page, you will see first topic, .NET and AWS. It's a good topic or tag to put on your questions. And you'll see questions and answers. It's a good place to answer questions, good place to offer answers. So community, many aspects of community, but very, very important to us and to you, we know. And we're always working to make that better. Social media, we're on Twitter at .NET on AWS. Please follow us there. That and the website are your two ways to keep up on news, what's happening. In conclusion, if I didn't make this clear earlier, AWS loves .NET. There's some links here that get you different places. But again, if you remember the AWS Amazon.com/net website, that really leads you to everything else. And this is my team. All of us have a social media presence or some kind of content we do. So we're all available to you as well. And we really do want to talk to you. At AWS, we have customer obsession as a tenet, and we are actually instructed to talk to customers all the time and get your feedback. So if you got a pain point and you want to share that with the AWS product team, we're very willing to make that happen. So please do reach out. Oh, you know what? We didn't see our Blazor thing. So our Blazor WebAssembly app is out here, and endpoint is I think let's give it a whirl. The right URL. So this is going through a nearby point of presence, one of 410 worldwide points of presence through a CDN to get to the S3 storage service statically hosted Blazor assembly. Here it is. Works. We did have to wait a few minutes, but it wasn't hard to do this. I didn't have to know anything about any of the services I showed you deploying to. And that doesn't mean you should stay ignorant, but you really can get underway that simply. And then the output helps you learn, and you go from there. Go to the management console, you try things, you learn, you read. But we're really working hard to make the getting started experience better and better. And this is part of the answer, we think. So mercifully, I am out of slides and demos. And if you've got any questions, I would love to talk with you.